give you a little bit of my background. I'm not from here, and I'm from Iowa, where I was born, raised, and educated. I have an MFA from the University of Iowa. I was raised in Iowa City, where the University of Iowa is, and I moved to Charleston after working with a really fabulous project called Ripple Effect through the South Carolina Arts Commission. I worked with that program for about 6 years. I was an admin in the group, and that brought me down to South Carolina, though I had been showing at Nina Lou and Friends since I graduated from grad school. About 1995, I started showing at Nina Lou. So I had some familiarity with being in South Carolina, but mostly Charleston and the Ripple Effect project, which was all about making things from recycled materials way before its time. Took us to Rock Hill and Columbia, different parts of South Carolina. My former husband and I decided to move to Charleston in '99, so I've been here since then. I still participate in metalworking, but it hasn't absorbed me in the same way that paper has. What does this have to do? Where I stumbled upon the great inspiration to my work, Timothy Barrett. He teaches at the University of Iowa as a research scientist, but he teaches in the art department. So this gives a student a great opportunity to know really all the chemistry and science behind paper without the heavy philosophy of art. It was a studio where you were free to experiment in any way you wanted, and he would be helpful all along the way. I stumbled upon it because somebody nearly suggested that I take paper making, and I said okay, and I was totally absorbed, and I spent 3 years in that studio. He wrote the book on Japanese paper making, and 2 years ago he was awarded a MacArthur for his research in hand paper making. A little bit about the history of paper. Of course, we all are familiar with it. It passes through our hands every day. It was discovered by Sai Lun in about 105 AD in China, where they held on to it for over 500 years and didn't share the secret. So it eventually came to Japan in 610, finally to Europe in 950, and as we go through the Bible, the Gutenberg Bible was produced in 1450, the modern machine called a Hollander beater, 1679, and by 1945, 14,000 paper products were being produced. It's probably more now, maybe a little less. So, what makes paper paper? What makes handmade paper that can look like that and be so different from what we're accustomed to in paperback books, newsprint, wrapping paper? And that is that paper is nearly 100% cellulose. Cellulose is the component of all green plants. It is the artery, the highway that provides the nutrients to creating the leaf and the food to feed the roots. So you can make paper out of many, many things. I prefer to, here's a cross-section of what fibers look like. I prefer to use two fibers primarily because of their long history in the tradition of hand paper making, their ability to be macerated, beaten until they become translucent, and they are beautiful. The variety that you can get is quite beautiful. The first is Abaca. It's the banana plant. It's also called, the Latin name is Musa textilis. We know Abaca because it's what they make tea bags from. And we know that a tea bag, you can pour boiling water on it and it doesn't disintegrate. Flax is what they make linen cloth from. So these are things that are familiar to us, but less familiar in the paper, familiar to us as paper. On the left, this is how they process the leaf stalk in the field. These are very renewable sources. They can be harvested every 8 to 10 months. This third line is it's not great with the light, how I get it, and then these are how they are broken down to start producing paper. The tools for paper making have historically been the same. There's really nothing that's changed. I'm a very traditional paper maker. We have water, we have something that breaks down, cuts the fiber, we have bats, a mold, a screen that you're going to lay the pulp on, felts to squish in the press. This is a quick overview of how you make a sheet of paper. Anything we can do about that light, Justin? First you have to, once you've gone through the beater, you agitate the fiber in a vat. It's just fiber and water. There are no chemicals involved. You dip your mold into the vat, and it flows onto the surface where you agitate it to start knitting those fibers together, and then you let it drain. And that can take some time. You then, once it's drained and all the water has come off, you take the decal off. Now maybe people are familiar with what a decal edge is. Often, most art papers still have that nice wavy line around the sheet. That's formed by the decal, which is the frame that fits over the screen. And then we couch it onto a felt. So each sheet is couched, a felt is laid, another sheet is couched, and we build that to make a post. Layer after layer after layer. For some reason, I do 11 sheets in each of my posts. That's about what I can lift to put it in the press. It's about 45 pounds. Because there's a lot of water involved. And then we press out the excess water to about 4,000 pounds per square inch, and that further knits the fibers together. After that, we remove it from the felt. And it's already a sheet of paper, though it's not dry. These are pictures of stacks of paper that I've made. In a good day, I used to be able to make almost 100 sheets in a day. That was about 5 years ago. I'm probably down a few now. So what am I going to do with all this paper? First of all, the whole process is a very meditative process. It's just fiber and water. There's this very sense of being, watching the ocean. It's a lovely thing, but I want to do something with it. I want to play with it. I want to sculpt it, mold it. So the first thing I did after grad school was I tried to marry the two disciplines that I specialized in, of metal and paper. and I started making jewelry. So this is a collection over a number of years of pieces that combined the two materials. There were a number of things that were important to me when I made the jewelry. First of all, it had to be comfortable on the body. It had to move with the body. It had to move with the wearer. It needed to be able to be touched, because when you wore it, people want to touch you to touch it, and I wanted to touch it. And another thing was it had to last. It had to withstand being caught in the rain, and there could be no glue. I allowed myself to use no glue, so I used all cold connections, which is a term we use in metalworking, where it's not fire, but you're hammering, you're crimping, you're shaping metal to hold that paper in place. And then I think as a natural course for many artists is you want to start working bigger. So here I am on the left. I used to do a lot of trade shows and jury national shows, Philadelphia Museum of Art, this kind of thing. And so I made this sheet that was about 30 feet long, one sheet at a time, pieced together when they were wet, and used it for the walls of my display at these trade shows. When you piece those sheets together, I use, it's essentially wallpaper paste, methyl cellulose, more cellulose, and that, pressing those sheets together, it essentially becomes a single sheet, even though it's divided by many small sheets. I also started hooching the sheets together when they were wet and making book forms. So now that you have seen some of the things I did with flat sheets, I became very aware of truly the structural abilities of paper itself, and decided to start interrupting the process, not letting the sheets dry, but start really playing with them when they've just been removed from the felt. I wanted to make paper that was self-supporting. There is no internal mechanism in the lamps on the stage here, and I wanted to start transmitting light because paper just springs for light. So I started with some vessels, and then I started incorporating some lighting. So this is kind of a group of pieces that shows those different things. I've twisted the paper, I've pleated it, giving it a ribbing for structure. I've twisted it, I've cut it. I've rolled 2 sheets together just at the edge to make a line. So it became about line and structure and light. Here I am making a lily pad, which many people are familiar with. It's 2 sheets of paper that I simply draw together to make this beautiful ribbing, and then glue one edge. Oh, sorry. And I did a field of these lily pads. They now hang at the MUSC's Ashley River Tower. There are approximately 200 lily pads ranging in size from 12 inches to 40 inches. Beautiful, I love that. And so you walk under the lily pads when you go into it, and it's in a chapel. Paper also has a fabulous ability to absorb sound. So when you're in there, it's a very quiet space. How does this happen? How do we get these varieties of papers from opaque to translucency? It's all done in what's called the Hollander beater. This is not mine. This is a bigger one. You always want a bigger one. Inside is a paddle wheel. It looks like a paddle wheel. It's made out of bronze. You put the fiber in the water in that vat, that donut shape, and the fiber passes through the roll, and underneath is a bed plate, and between those two surfaces it cuts the fiber. The longer you beat the fiber, the more translucent the fiber and the paper becomes. This is some examples of the translucencies and different textures when you've used that to give more depth. I've been doing that I still do it. I've been doing it for a long time, but recently I found myself looking at just the pulp and saying, well, what can I do with this really amazing plastic clay-like material that is dense, will become rigid, and I started working with just the pulp. This is what it looks like when I've started in the studio. These pieces are finished. It shrinks 50% of its original size. So all of that is knitting those fibers together tighter and tighter. It's amazingly strong. I think we could build buildings with it. So I've really enjoyed just working directly with the pulp and seeing what happens. Two and a half years ago, I was awarded a fabulous opportunity to work within the Smithsonian for what's called their Artist Research Fellowship. It was an application. You had to be nominated to apply. And it's rather an overwhelming proposition to go to work at the Smithsonian, and you can do whatever you want, where they have 4 million artifacts. You can work with any of the museums if you can find a person to mentor you while you're there. I chose the botany department. So I spent my time at the Museum of Natural History, where they have 5 million species in their herbarium. The top one with the cabinet, that's how they stack all these millions of specimens. And you can just go in and start looking at plants, what they look like, one after another, specializing. The one on the right is the seed pod from a lily pad. They have things from all over the world. Now, in part, I chose the botany department because I didn't want to spend all my time in a museum. I wanted to go in the field, and the botany department has partnered for many years, now over 25 years, with the country of Guyana to document their plant life. They have brought back 55,000 specimens from Guyana to include in their herbarium, and they sistered to have a collection also at the University of Guyana in South America. Again, more lily pads. Obviously, I was into the lily pads. I wanted to see what they look like from different parts, their structures. To me, I just see paper when I look at these. I just see all the possibilities. Forming and folding. So I went to Guyana. I went twice. It's a small country, but it's the beginning of the Amazon rainforest. It's also the highest canopy of the Amazon. So I went into the rainforest. Here I am traveling above the landscape. This is in the Iwakama Reserve. Their fabulous tree bridge, which is over 100 feet in the air, that you traverse from tree to tree to tree to look down for once instead of looking up. This is, you look down. And I was there to really look at the source, to see they have such a variety there that, you know, just turning your head, you can see a new kind of growth and a new plant structure, and how things rely on each other, and how weather affects things, and what grows on something else. So these are some pictures from there. I was there during the rainy season, which virtually means that any road becomes a river, and you now take boats, small boats. And on the top left is what's called a banab, and that's the traditional housing of Guyana. It's a lovely little thing. On the bottom right of this image frame is Tycheer Falls, which is the tallest single drop waterfall in the world at 751 feet. And these are some of the images that I took of the variety of plants they have there. I think it's, you know, it's still resonating with me. I think it will come out for a very long time, just to see that depth and that bounty, just the bounty. It's a country that is 78% pristine. So you can really see it's primordial. It's primordial. And of course, I looked at lily pads, and there they have the largest lily pad in the world, called the Victoria Amazonica, that grows up to 11 feet in diameter. There are fields of these, literally fields. That's what it looks like on the top right. That's underneath the second one, flipped over. They're very spiny. Beautiful structure. This is a nice shot of the flower, the lotus flower that blooms for a single night. A beetle, a scarab beetle, goes inside, and the flower closes around the scarab, and the following night it reopens, turns pink, and dies. So you can watch that whole thing in about a 24-hour period. And now we look at my sewing machine, which is where I am now. I have a 1962 industrial sewing machine, and it's what I had to have to sew paper with such typography. It took a long time to find one that would work, and as you've seen here in this bean market, I started using it. The first quilts I did were last summer for a commission for another MUSC building in Mount Pleasant now. And these pieces were all made from little tiny sheets of paper that I had painted and then constructed. There are 4 pieces in this collection: a forest, a garden, the ocean, and architecture. They're 4 by 5 feet in size. Sorry. But you don't have to use a big sheet of paper or little pieces to sew a sheet of paper, to sew something. You can use a big sheet. And so I was at the annual Dart Hunter, which is a paper-making conference, last October. And we were doing a paper runway show, so I decided to make a paper dress. And this is made from what I call bark paper. It's sheets that have been pieced together wet, and then I paint walnut dye, which is the dye from the husk of a black walnut, to give it this rich dark color. And I used a simple pattern to make my little bark dress. And then here we are in Lake City. And what to do for this opportunity. And I started looking at topo maps, and I looked at a lot of topo maps and looking at how we change the landscape, how we use it for agriculture and for living and for growth and for industry. And that's what started percolating for this piece in the back, that I would do some kind of topographic map of what surrounds us. We have the bean market. This is the piece in process in my studio. They were all formed in 16-inch squares and then sewn together, rearranged many times. And I was very inspired. If you haven't seen it, you need to look behind the quilt where there is Tiny Town. And Tiny Town is also a quilt, but I have used a blade, an X-Acto blade, to cut a little town on the surface. How's everybody doing? I think what I'd like you to take away from this mini presentation is that paper has these amazing qualities, intrinsic qualities of internal strength, flexibility, and its ability to transmit light. Is that my cue? Oh. I'd like to add also that making the material that I work with has been an adventure for almost 25 years now. And it's because the paper keeps informing me of new ways to work with it. I keep finding new things. What can I do with it today? But I believe that an intimate and hands-on knowledge of one's material has foundation. That science can inform the work's outcome based on how we treat the fibers before we make the sheets. That experiments generate new ideas. And that the evidence of the hand in my work, and in work that is made by hand, creates nuances for me that I find in nature.